Two wood duck families. One was feeding in a pond, the other was sleeping on a log at a different pond. I also found a spotted white-tailed deer fawn, a group of common mergansers, several beautiful butterflies, and one quiet mystery involving a female merganser swimming alone. These were some of the highlights from another week exploring Pennsylvania's parks and waterways. Welcome back to Wondering About Nature. At Noel Dorwart Park, I came across a spotted white-tailed deer fawn with its mother. The fawn's white spots help it blend into the vegetation as it stays close to her. Nearby, a cottontail rabbit was feeding. I also watched a skipper butterfly moving from flower to flower. These smaller scenes can be just as interesting as the larger wildlife sightings. A rabbit feeding beside a trail, a butterfly pausing on a bloom, and a young deer learning to navigate the world. At Safe Harbor and Conestoga River Parks, I checked on the Common Merganser family I've been following. The large group is still doing well. The ducklings were active, moving across the water and staying together as they were close to their mother. But I also saw one female swimming alone. There was no duckling with her. I don't know whether her duckling failed to survive or whether this was a different female altogether. That's one of the difficult parts of watching wildlife over time. Sometimes the answer is clear. Other times, all we can do is observe carefully and avoid assuming more than we know. I also checked on the cliff swallows. They're still using their mud nests, moving around the nesting area and returning to the same small structures they had built in the park. The flowers around the park were attracting plenty of insect life. I saw tiger swallowtails and monarchs feeding on flowers. A Red Admiral was resting on the ground. And a blue dancer damselfly perched on a plant. Watch closely in places like this. The flowers may seem still, but they are often filled with movement. You may only notice it when a butterfly opens its wings or a damselfly shifts slightly in the sunlight. At Lancaster County Central Park, I found another swallowtail feeding on a flower. I also caught an Acadian flycatcher resting on a tree and a mourning dove perched nearby. One of my favorite parts of this visit was recording an overview of the Wildflower Meadows. The meadow provided more than a beautiful view. It was also feeding butterflies, sheltering insects, and creating habitat for many small creatures that are easy to overlook. The highlight of my week was my visit to Silver Mine Park. There I found two different wood duck families at two separate ponds. The first family was feeding in the water. A second group was sleeping on a log. It was a wonderful contrast. One family was busy and active. The other had found a quiet place to rest. Along the shoreline, I watched a solitary sandpiper make its way beside the pond. I also saw my first widow skimmer dragonflies of the season. They were zipping around, so I wasn't able to get a video of them, but I did get a photograph. The tiger swallowtails were active around the park, and painted turtles were hanging out in the pond. Nearby, a northern mockingbird fluttered through wet leaves. It may have been searching for food or possibly getting a bath. I have another video of a bird doing something similar, and I'll link that video at the end of this one. I also watched a great blue heron preening for an extended time as it sat on a sycamore tree that had fallen across the creek. A flycatcher rested on a nearby branch, and ebony jewelwings sat and fluttered on leaves beside the water. This week's visits reminded me how much wildlife can be found along the edges of ponds, creeks, meadows, and wooded trails. Some animals were feeding, some were resting, some were raising young, and others were simply passing through. The more time we spend watching, the more these small connections begin to appear. From the young deer at Noel Dorwart Park to the wood duck families at Silver Mine Park, this was another rewarding week in Pennsylvania outdoors. If you enjoyed this video of my explorations of the week, please consider subscribing and return for the next nature adventure. Keep wondering about nature. Thanks for watching.